Hello and welcome to the Where Does It Come From podcast. I'm really excited this time to have Azzouz with me. Azzouz is the co-founder of the Coffee Link chain here in Suffolk. And so thank you. Welcome aboard the Where Does It Come From podcast, Azzouz.
Thank you. Good morning, Joe. Thank you very much. Thank you for inviting me to be with you and talk to you.
It's wonderful to have you here, and we've met on several occasions, and we are keen customers of Coffee Link as well, which is always a nice thing. So first question I really wanted to ask you, Coffee Link is a sustainable, ethical, traceable coffee brand. What prompted you to start that up?
It was a transformation, really. So we didn't set up an ethical business, really. So we've become ethical in a way, even though the motives, the ethics of the business were sort of ethical, but from the beginning. But we've become more ethical as years passed by, and for example, 5 years ago, we decided to have 120 solar panels on our roastery in Ipswich. And a few years before that, we started using biodegradable cups. And a few years before that, maybe a couple of years after we started, back in 2007, we were noted online and for our support for Rainforest Alliance certified coffees. And we were approached by the certification body, and we are now certified Rainforest Alliance coffee suppliers. So it has been really a transformation, a series of changes, and as we grew, as Rebecca and I grew into the business and grew the number of units we have, we realized that it's so important to really interact with our customers and suppliers in more ethical ways, and try and look for products that will make a difference, so both to our customers and our producers. Since then, obviously, our business grew, and we are indebted to people like yourself who support us, especially in Suffolk, that helped us really grow and go to Essex and Hertfordshire and borderline with Norfolk. So, and now obviously with online. So we have really grown, and we feel really lucky and blessed that we've had the support we've had, and we couldn't have done it with our customer without our customers. I just feel that being ethical makes sense, and there has never been a time really where those values are much more needed than they are now. I just feel lucky that we've started our journey into ethical practices a long time ago, and it probably did seem like a lonely thing to do, and you scratch your head and think, oh, am I compromising my profitability by trying to do things differently? And I'm proud to say that actually it's, I'm proud to have made decision or taken decision the way we've done. And I'm sure you can relate to those stories, because you probably have a similar trajectory where you've had a series of thoughts that made you the things that you do and starting your organization. And it's very, very inspiring, as I said to you earlier, when you see there are more people doing it, because it just reinforces those ethics, it reinforces those experiences, and you think, wow, we are doing the right thing. This is the right route to take to growth, to profitability, to being a better human being, really. And so, yes, our journey started, but not so ethical as it is at the moment. But the heart was always there, both from drawing experiences from my childhood back in Morocco, to living on a sort of farm with olive groves, and everyone having to chip in and harvest, and to having all sorts of vegetables growing. And you think life was a lot simpler, but was more meaningful. And I would like to carry that in our decision making. And now is just a matter of trying to communicate those values to the rest of the team and make sure that people who join us share those values, because work relationships don't always work if you don't really see eye to eye when it comes to those values. It's just easier now because everyone is more aware, and it's a good place to get to, because there was not as much awareness say 10 years ago or 15 years ago when we established our business. I find it easier now. I feel more energetic about it, even though sometimes I feel really tired. But you do feel more energized because you think, wow, there's more momentum. If you watch news on television, these, talk about the environment. I was watching Prince William talk about, and it was inspiring. It was a fantastic program because you look and you think, wow, these countries around the world, there are people like me. There are actually people in developing countries, in first world countries, third world countries, and they're all doing the same thing, and they all have a very similar awareness. And I think it's very inspiring, very important. And I think it's just a matter of time before there will be a tipping point where people will become much more familiar with these things, because you can be profitable and ethical at the same time. You can sleep better at night. You don't have to do anything that damages the environment, because now if we're related to coffee, you either buy a coffee that deforests, or you either buy a coffee that sustains a forest. And this is the subject, obviously, that we could talk about later, why we choose forest grown coffees. And I've been to Ethiopia a couple of years ago, and it was a fantastic experience because I knew Ethiopian coffees were special, but I didn't really realize until I was there. And you visit a farm and you don't know what kind of farm you visit. And when you go and find a farm in the middle of a forest, and I think, wow, this is fantastic.
No, it's amazing. I think the forest. Well, we'll talk about all of the traceability, but I think it is that whole thing about once you know the stories behind things, isn't it? And that's what we do, obviously. And that's what I love about your website. You're talking about the stories, the farmers, the people you've met, because I suppose we've come into this world where we just want something, we go to the shop and we pick it off the shelf and we put it in our basket or order it online, and you have no connection with that, you have no emotional connection with that. But once you know the story that the farmers are growing it, like you say, they're in the forest, it's just more special, isn't it?
Yes. Oh, absolutely. I mean, it's important, and I think we just need to be better at communicating those messages. We get busy with the daily business, and we're not a polished business, in terms of our marketing campaigns, and bigger companies tend to do a better job, but maybe with less heart than we do in a way, because I think it's really important to tell those stories, because they mean so much to our customers, because our customers go out of their way to support us. They could get coffee anywhere, but as I said to you, I know that bigger companies sometimes go to a village and say, oh, there's £100,000 to a buyer, and then they would buy coffee for next to nothing. Because they will say, oh, I can pay you this price, but I will buy all your harvest. And
then they can't. That's the supermarket buying, it changes it. I just wanted to go back, because I don't think you've really been, I think you've been very modest about your success. So you started in 2005, was it?
That's right, yes.
2005. I mean, so that's what's a long time ago. I don't do the maths here and now, and you've made these incredible changes. But how many outlets do you have now?
At the moment, we have 18.
Yes, that's amazing.
Yes, it has dropped because we had to close a few units, and the pandemic has really affected us in so many ways. And we're not the only ones, but it's been an amazing learning curve, really, both financially, emotionally, culturally for the business. But even though we're tired, we are really full of energy in terms of seeing what could be for our business.
Full of beans, Azzouz.
Exactly, full of beans. That's a good one. I love that. See, if I said it would sound really bad. So we are full of beans, absolutely, and we've got so many coffees to shout about. But there are so many positives actually to the pandemic, and I know it sounds really horrible, but it's been a tough time. But only during those tough times do you discover certain things to yourself, to ourselves, and our businesses are no different, because what are our businesses? They're just a collection of individuals. So we tend to talk about business as if this different structure, but it is us. It's
people.
Us, humans.
It's all people. Customers are people, the makers are people, the staff are people.
Exactly.
So again, you're not boasting enough. I'm just going to say, you say you have 18 outlets, you have a large number of staff, you sell online, you hire out or you put out coffee carts and things for events as well, don't you? And
That's
pop
right.
up all over marketplaces and things like that. I mean, it's amazing what you've achieved in this time, and without compromising on your principles, in fact growing your principles and doing more and more and more. So I mean, it's, as you said before, it's a lonely place, and I think back in 2005 it was probably an even lonelier place than it is now.
Yes, I mean, it was, honestly, I really remember days when I thought, well, I want to serve this coffee, and sometimes the pricing can be prohibitive, because obviously to our customers, especially because you want to provide a service that will make a difference to their lives, make their day better, and we know how important coffee is. But now there's another layer. You say, well, I want to buy this coffee and serve this coffee to our customers because I genuinely think it's the right thing to do, because it doesn't damage the environment, it protects a forest. You need a forest to be able to call a coffee forest coffee. And by the way, when I talk about forest coffee, we're not talking about um, um, overly grown forests or wild forests. We're talking about managed forests, because obviously in tropical forests, it's very impenetrable. You know, you can't go in and just say, oh, I'm going to harvest this tree. So we're talking about forests that are forests, but they are managed, so to speak, in the sense that they have coffee shrubs at the base of lovely huge trees, and those are the kind of environments I talk about. So there is no deforestation to grow coffee. There are some farms that you and I would associate with a vineyard style coffee farm. So those are what I would probably hesitate to buy. But sometimes we have to, because the demand, our customers sometimes don't really care so much. But we notice that there is an increase in number of people who do care, who want to know the stories, who ask questions. We have emails that really want to know where the coffee came from. They want to read about it. They want to see images. They want to see the certifications that we have. So there is a much greater awareness. So gone are the days where people are just happy with a stale brew or a stale cup of coffee. So people are much more demanding. And we were just having this conversation here over a cup of coffee this morning, and our palates are changing so much that it's honestly, it's music to my ear, because it just challenges us in the most positive way. Our customers are saying, do you know what, we don't mind if we pay a little bit more, but we want nice coffees. We don't want our coffee to come from farms where employees are abused or overworked. We want our coffee to come from places where there's no deforestation. And as I said to you, really, in real terms, it translates: are we buying produce that helps deforestation, or are we not? And those are the thought processes that we need to have now, because whether it's coffee, tea, chocolate, clothing, we just need to unlearn what we've learned for so many years. And we need to really start questioning everything and say, am I supporting a business that deforests? Am I
Exactly.
am I supporting a business that underpays their employees, or I know slave labor is probably a strong word for this, but it does exist.
It certainly does. Yes,
It
it
does. I
certainly
mean,
does. Yeah.
for
And it's
clothing,
it's the out of sight things, isn't it? So I mean, I was talking to a bunch of kids at West Suffolk College day before yesterday, and it was trying to say to them, I don't mind what questions you ask, but ask the questions. Whenever you go into a shop, ask the questions. And they're saying, well, people won't know the answers. I know, but if they don't know the answers, then maybe they'll go and ask the questions. But we have to ask the questions. Is it damaging the environment? Is it harmful for the people who are making it? And so many other things. I mean, I bet you a lot of people don't think about deforestation when it comes to coffee.
oh, absolutely. I mean, it's so, I mean, coffee can actually help reforestation, because coffee comes from tropical climates, for example. It doesn't grow in the northern hemisphere, it doesn't grow in the southern hemisphere. So there is a sort of belt, we call it the coffee belt, around the globe. And that's where coffee grows. So it tends to be high altitude, very fertile soil, and that's where most of the forests, big forests, happen. I watched, I can't remember the name of the program, but was a program about Papua New Guinea, and it's
Mhm.
the fourth biggest rainforest in the world. And I didn't know that. I mean, these are selection of islands and by New Zealand and Australia. And the coffee is amazing, but
Mm.
there is such a lack of information, and most of the farmers struggle to export their coffees. So I am thinking, well, what can we do to actually get those coffees
That's
and
brilliant.
keep things as they are? Keep things as they are. Because when I was in Ethiopia, uh, uh, again, it probably doesn't sound, it sounds wrong to say, but sometimes farmers lack of knowledge and material means to interfere or overdevelop is actually a blessing. It's a good thing. No, this is not to say I'm in favor of keeping farmers poor. The opposite. I'm actually buying and paying above market prices for coffee just to achieve a level of parity or fairness in our because we tend to make more money in the West than producing countries,
Yes. Yeah,
and
definitely.
that's definitely not sustainable. Because when you visit a farm and you find the conditions not good, you think, well, I don't feel good. I think
No, exactly.
it's wrong. So we say, how much would you like for your coffee? And then we say, yes, but we want the best cherries,
Mm.
only the best, only the ripest cherries. So those are the conditions and the kind of conversations we have with our producers. And it is difficult because you could say, I can pay as much as I can, but then you need to be able to say, I can sell it profitably.
Yeah,
And
definitely.
yeah, and it's a really, we're in the UK, we are probably better positioned to achieve that, to make sure that the model works where people are willing to pay.
But
People are,
it's the communication, as we said before, isn't it? If people understand, I mean, what you're talking about with regards to relationships with farmers, it reminds me very much of what we talk about with cotton in the industry that I'm involved with. So we are now trying to work with farmers who farm using indigenous seeds, indigenous cotton varieties, because they're in sympathy with the planet, so they don't require rainfall, they don't require water, they use the rainfall, they don't require hazardous pesticides because they're used to it kind of, I don't know, evolved with knowing about the pest situation in that area. But of course it's humanity that's transported seeds and done genetic modifications and things that requires the amount of water and pesticides and chemicals that get added to things. So we kind of want to go, I wouldn't say go back really, it's going forward, but with that knowledge, so that the farmers can keep farming in the way that is traditional and using this indigenous seeds and cultivation methods that they have used going back, you know, hundreds of thousands of years or whatever.
yes,
But they're being valued for that. It's not like you're just some farmer far away and we don't want to know what you do, we just want the product. It's like, let's celebrate that, let's help that. But and as you say, don't encourage them to be doing some of the things that will maybe give them bigger yields and things like that, because that isn't the answer for our planet.
yes, yes, absolutely. And these subjects are very important to address, because the balance between growth and sustainability is, they're not really compatible sometimes. Because yes, all of us want to have year-on-year growth, but I've started having second thoughts about this. Yes, you want to grow, but at what costs? How what is the real cost really? Yes, there is an inner desire in all of us to expand and grow and achieve our ideas. But I think the key to doing it sustainably is probably a better understanding of the purpose, the real purpose really, for why you want to do it. And this is why I said earlier, we need to unlearn the stuff that we've been taught for so many years, because it's very tempting just to follow and just achieve, because you see other companies, you think, oh wow, they're doing so well, I could do the same. Of course it's tempting, but for me, I want to grow up. I want to do it really in a better way. And I want to buy better coffees. I want to serve better coffees. But I also know, because I'll give you an example, going back again to forest grown coffee. Traditionally, people would frown in the industry about forest grown coffee because they can't achieve the consistency of quality. I think that's the beauty of it, you know. I mean, I really, and I think there will be a return in the industry to how special it is to have something that's slightly different than last season, and has different minerals, different sugar levels than last season, because it reflects the rainfall of the season, whatever. And I mean, I'm sure we can all relate to supermarket food that gets rejected because it doesn't really look like a carrot, and we're going to take it away because even though it's a carrot and tastes like a carrot, the supermarket will not include it in the carrot box. Because so those are the kind of examples that I can give you to illustrate. So but I am so passionate about forest grown coffee that I genuinely feel is the best way forward if we are to stop deforesting just to grow coffee. And it's a very insatiable appetite at the moment, where we could use coffee to actually reforest, you know, to really, you know, it takes 5 years to get a coffee harvest from a shrub. Amazing amount of years that you could grow, regrow forest. But it's easier said than done, because none of us really individually has enough control to say, I want this to be done. So it needs more involvement. And this is why in the last couple of years, 3 years, I've shown more interest to learn about the SDGs. I'm sure you've heard of this.
Definitely.
And thanks to Gary Battelle, actually, who is a forestry advisor with the Ipswich Borough Council. And he was with me on the trip to Ethiopia, and introduced me to a charity that his uncle started in Ethiopia, and called Partners for Change. And so it's and he really introduced me to the Sustainable Development Goals during an event. And now I'm thinking, wow, actually, and that's the next big thing. When enough people see the purpose of it, the reasons for doing it, because wouldn't it be amazing where you know that your actions help people have food on the table and it's fair? And would it be amazing to know that your actions are not deforesting someone's forest? Now we know that it's important because we know that we share the air, so air doesn't know borders, so it's just going to come our way somehow.
That's really true.
Yeah, and it's important to highlight these, but I know my limitations. I know I'm just or only one business who wants to succeed, yes, but also wants to do it sustainably, ethically. But we're faced with obstacles all the time. I used to worry about the obstacles, but now I say, bring them on in a way, because we need to go through them. We really need to go through them so we can see if there's a better way, truly a better way of doing things. And I just enjoy going through mine. It sounds really crazy, but I'm thinking, well, we need to go through those experiences, those obstacles, those battles, so we can see what's on the other side. Is there truly a better way of living? And I think
no, definitely. Do you know, it's interesting. You triggered two things in me. One, yet again, the similarities between cotton and fabrics and fibers with coffee, because some of the fibers and fabrics we work with, that the cotton grows differently every year, you know, based on the rainfall and those kind of things, and then they're hand woven. And a lot of big companies will say, but it needs to be exactly the same color, it needs to be exactly the same texture, the cotton needs to be the same. We're like, well, that isn't nature. Nature isn't the same every single year. So, you know, it's something that it isn't possible to, it isn't. And I think it's the beauty of it. You don't want everything. Why are we so used to having everything exactly the same all the time? You know, the beauty is that nature changes, and so do the things that you take from nature change as well. So that, I think that's a really interesting point. And then the other thing you just said about sort of pushing through and seeing through to the other side and making it better, it makes me think back to a few episodes ago. I interviewed John Taylor, who works in the green energy area, and he made the point that we seem to think that we've got, what we've got is as good as it gets, and being as sustainable and ethical will take away from what we have now, whereas in fact what we can get by working with the Sustainable Development Goals and working with ethics and sustainability is something better than we've got now. We should be aiming for something even better, not thinking that, you know, this is what we've got and it's going to be taken away from it.
Yes, I know John actually, because he I attended the well, he knows Gary Battelle as well. So
yeah,
like
I've met Gary as well.
Yeah, so you can see there is a little bit of a connection there. And I mentioned to you earlier about our 120 solar panels, and you can see them if you do Google Earth on our roastery, which I am really proud of. And I'm even more proud that it happened a good few years ago.
Yeah.
But John was the person I spoke to about it, and I picked his brain, and they had some schemes in place which we didn't take advantage of. But it just made me realize, actually, I want to do this, but I want to do it independently. And I'm glad we did, because we actually now put energy back into the grid, which is lovely to do. So yeah, I mean, I think there are, as you rightly said, it doesn't really matter whether it's coffee or cotton. It's the values behind it, it's the purpose behind it, it's why. It's the why. We're scared to ask why, because we've been conditioned. And we learned over the years how to do things, and we look and we judge, and we just make up our mind. But I genuinely think that it's time again to ask why. Why are we doing it?
Yes, questions all the time. Questions. I think it's so important. I mean, one thing we did talk about just before the call, we were starting to chat, and I said, no, hold that for the call. But I certainly find, as where does it come from? I'll put my hands up. And I know that lots of people that we probably both know and struggle with, when you offer an ethical, sustainable product in a market where still cheap tends to be the top of the list. So if you're buying online, everyone's comparing by price and nothing else. It's a challenge to get your story across in a way that people understand that it's so much more than just the price. It's the other values behind the product, the quality of the product, and the whole supply chain. Has this been a problem for you, trying to get that message across about price versus ethics?
Yes, it is. It is a big issue. Like no one wants to pay high prices. I mean, it's an instinct. It's we're all bargain hunters, you know, naturally, instinctively. We like to look for value, and but this is the question of reimagining value, redefining value, because what is value? This is where we start asking the question, really. Is value just to me, or is value just to you, or is it value to us? And how we connect with each other. And I think once we start defining the meaning of the word value, and become more inclusive, then those impulses that stop us from supporting one another disappear, because your success is my success. And if I see you doing well, I mean, I draw inspiration from what you do. You know, I do. I mean, I see a lot of people do things, and I think, we don't say it, but you think about it. And sometimes you think about it a week later, a day later, an hour later, and you think, oh wow, why would that person do that? You know. And then once you start peeling the layers, you know, of the reasoning behind it, and you think, oh wow, okay, well, that person is a little bit more enlightened. They've got a better understanding, and then you start feeling that temptation to be better yourself. And then when you start understanding it fully, you really accept the cost. The cost becomes secondary, because the cost is the price you pay, but it's not the end, it's the means to the end. So
yeah,
if you want a better piece of fabric, you want to pay as much as it takes to get it.
Yes,
you
exactly.
Want it.
Exactly. And I think people will, it's interesting, when I was talking to a customer recently about fabrics, and we were talking about, I think it was comparing, again, it's forest silk. It's about growing, picking up the silk cocoons from a forest. So it's that whole reforestation thing again. And we were talking about prices for things like cottons and bamboos and things like that. And the customer was saying, oh no, something like forest silk, if a customer's talking about something like that, they're not even caring about the price. For them, that's just a luxury, that's a top of the range. It doesn't matter what the price is. So it's almost like it's the lower prices where people are looking for that value. When you get right up high to the top of the range, there's no value. And it's the same with wine, isn't it? Actually, people will haggle over a cheap wine, but they'll pay anything for a top of the range wine. And I think because those kind of people understand that they're unique, they have
Yes.
their own attributes. You know, it's a
Yes.
story. Again, it's the story behind the wine, that when the grapes grew, all of that kind of thing.
Absolutely, and I think you made me think of another example I can share with you. I mean, you probably find it, and because I did too, unimaginable that somebody would pay £5,000 for a kilogram of coffee, but it did happen in an auction, because that was a finite amount of coffee, and someone in South Korea bought it. I mean, it just made me stop, when I
Yeah.
heard it. But this highlights, this is obviously an extreme example where somebody who happens to have enough funds wants to outbid anybody, and it was an auction, so there was a lot of wild bidding, but that person would be happy because A, they have the funds, B, they wanted the products.
Yeah.
So because they wanted it, they can justify the ends. Again, it's really difficult to talk about this subject because, again, you don't want to dismiss that some people can't have enough.
No.
They'll not have enough means to pay for those things. And again, it's really difficult to really try and make sense of it all. So I don't mean to dismiss when someone hasn't got enough money to pay certain things, but it's just the way we think about things, the way we define value, because I think that we are all capable of doing the right thing. And I think maybe, just maybe, once we start reimagining and redefining what the word value means, it will trickle down. Maybe the whole thing will change. Maybe there will be a new way of doing things. That's the lack and the concept of lack may not be as dominant as it is now, because it's not nice when you see someone who has to buy heavily processed food or struggles to buy necessities to eat.
Yeah.
For me, it's not good.
It's not acceptable, is it? I mean, the
yeah.
thought that somebody like that, the thought of going into a coffee shop and spending £3 on a cup of coffee, that £3 could buy them, you know,
Yes.
potatoes, a meal, whatever. And it's but then that's awful and tragic. But the majority of, say, like in London, working people going to offices, maybe not so much now, but they're just popping in and buying a coffee on the way to work. It's just normal for them.
Exactly. So it's all excuse me, it's all relative. But it's a very I find it really important subject to tackle, and we need to all be more conscientious buyers. I still feel that we are probably better positioned in this country because people are highly conscientious with their spending. Not everyone, but people tend to really give a lot of thought to where they buy things. But as I said, all of us want value. We can't help it. We like to shop around, but if the information available now, and I think it's heartwarming to see the issues of climate change on the news almost every day, because that will be fundamentally changing our culture of thinking. Because at the end of the day, it really is us who I know everyone knows it's us, but if there is pollution in one country, or there is a factory in Bangladesh that's with horrible conditions goes up in fire, or it's really us. We're actually driving that. The demand is so big that, and because we're bargain hunters, we tend to go to places that sell those products.
Yes.
And because we want to. So this is where I said to you the word value. Whose value is it? Is it because we're so selfish that we just worry about our value, or is it because if we only stopped when we buy a T-shirt for £1 or £1.50 brand new, and I think, well, how much would an employee get for this £1? Is it 20 pence?
That's exactly the questions I was putting to these students the other day. Actually, I was trying to say, break it down, break it down all the time, and ask those questions. How much is the brand getting? How much is the tailor getting? How much is the farmer getting? All the way through. But it's an interesting one. I mean, probably one we could go talk about for hours around economic models. I mean, I agree with you. I think it's values are changing for many people, and we're asking a lot of questions. But while it is still the economic model that we have now, which is plenty, isn't it? It's having warehouses packed full of coffee beans, cotton, clothing, whatever, and people they're making it in mass, and they're buying it in mass, and those things are then available for people, and people seem to take that as their right. I mean, we see when energy prices go up, or when petrol is suddenly not available, as we've had over the last couple of weeks, people are arguing about that. And the same as you, I understand that there's people who genuinely can't afford, and it's a real struggle for them. So I have huge sympathy with that. But there's also a very large bunch of people in the middle who believe it is their right, and maybe we all have this, maybe this is in all of us, it's our right to have what we want when we want it. And that's because, and for a price that we find acceptable. And that is something that has been created in us by our market culture, whereas in fact resources are finite, and there are other people in the world who are making those things for us, and there are impacts on our whole future, our whole planet's future by that. So there needs to be a change in the way we think about how we use items, and also thinking about the impacts of everything that we buy. But maybe we need to somehow get over this thing that it's our right to have what we want when we want, and to pay what we want, and otherwise it's not fair.
Yes. Yes, I think you've that's a brilliant point, because it's the sense of expectation and the sense of maybe entitlement. Maybe again, it's another strong word, but we always feel, and this is where I said the selfishness sometimes of us as consumers, and our bargain hunting mentality. And as I said, it's everyone. I do it. I'm trying to become more aware of it, and I try and change my buying habit, whether it's coffee or where you eat or what you buy, or I try and look. I mean, I'll give you an example. For example, there was a program a couple of years ago about a Vietnamese expat who lived in America, in the United States of America, and then moved back. And he did a documentary about a big manufacturer, maybe I shouldn't mention the name, but of instant coffee. And the appetite probably far stronger in developing countries in Africa. And the whole country was geared towards producing Robusta, which is a lower grade of coffee, grows in lower elevations, is much more disease resistant and higher in caffeine. So that's what makes instant coffee, which is heavily processed. And he was almost in tears, because he said, well, the land has been stripped of its minerals because of the pesticides and herbicides to really strengthen the harvest. And the facility of this business was impressive. I mean, they're huge. They're probably number one in the world, and it's huge business, a European-based business. And so the facility was impressive. And yes, I thought, wow, that's amazing. But then again, when you think about it, I thought, wow, the whole farming community is feeding just this one business. Now, if this business stops buying from them, and it's so easy to monopolize and say, I will buy all your harvest, but you send me your pound or your coffee for £1 a kilo or less. It's so strong, and they do it. And more importantly, not just the business dynamic, it's the land, because the land is stripped.
Yeah.
And the land would be no good for anyone for 5 years. I don't know, it needs resting, it needs rainfall, minerals, replenishment, and so on. And it needs to repair itself. And I think we probably take it for granted now how much we draw from Earth. We are literally Earth, on walking on 2 feet, because that's what we do. We get our nourishment from Earth. And we that's how, everything's connected. But lots of people don't see it that way.
No. You take from it. It's something that you take from. You don't have to put back. That's a really, really interesting point that you're saying there. And it reminds me of a movie that was made a few years ago called The True Cost movie. And it was about fashion, but it was asking how do we measure the actual costs in making a product? Because at the moment we don't, do we? You buy the cloth, in your case the base coffee or whatever. You don't think about the earth and what happens to the earth. How do you measure those costs? How do you measure the effects of the biodiversity in that area of the pesticides and chemicals? How do you measure the carbon that has been, so all of those different things are not measured. You don't measure in terms of price. The price, just that things get sold for a certain price as low as possible, but there are long-term costs.
Yeah, I mean, we do. I think we do take it for granted, but I think it's high time to really bring it to the fore and realize that we really do. We have the authority, the power to actually make those decisions. Maybe we should eat less. Maybe we should eat better. And for me, it's like it's an easy. We should be more discerning about what we eat, but maybe eat less. I don't know. Maybe instead of having, I don't know, it's really difficult. But as I said, personally, I think we need to be more careful about our buying habits because it literally impacts everything.
Yes.
But we don't see it immediately because you can't, we don't have time to connect the dots and say, oh, where does my vegetable come from? I mean, look, I've just said it without thinking, but really, you asked a very good point. Where does it come from?
Where does it come from? Yeah.
It's really, it's funny because only after I said it, we are what you do, and it's so important to really ask those questions. Where is it going? Where does it come from? How much does it cost? Yes, they're fantastic questions because then you can say, well, I can buy this, or I don't need to buy this, because just by exercising that authority, you're making one business thrive and then not another. And I think it's about time. Businesses, because some businesses have been printing money literally, because we've been like just fed anything and we bought anything, and so it is time to highlight the ones that do well in certain areas, because when you said it was it wasn't just for us lonely, it was for many producers.
Oh, hugely.
Yeah, because they couldn't. I mean, I feel blessed and lucky that we're still going. But some people can't. They give up, or they get too bogged down with it.
Exactly.
Financial circumstances, and they give up. But we mustn't give up because it's so fundamental. It's so important to really realize what we're doing is right. And this is what I said to you when I see people like yourself. You not just the inspiration; it's actually the energy. You think, well, actually, yes, this can be done. There are a lot of people. And
we are very lucky. I mean, I'll say to you here now, I find what you do hugely inspiring, and I feel kind of in awe of your success of having achieved what you've achieved. As well, I keep saying it's amazing. You've been going since 2005, and you have, I mean, for people who are listening to this, who are not based in Suffolk and around East Anglia, there's coffee links everywhere now. They're popping up. You go to an event, there's a coffee link store, and I'm like, that's Azzouz and Rebecca's brand. That's amazing. I think that's amazing. I the same as you, I would love my plans for where does it come from are not to pop up at every with a coffee cart at every event, but to be so known and to be known for your ethics and your values. And I mean, personally, I know my husband is a huge fan of Coffee Link, and if we were somewhere, he would, and there was a choice of coffees, and he would go to Coffee Link. Even if he wouldn't look at the price, it would be the thing. And and he doesn't know you; he just likes your coffee and likes your values.
Well, give him my thanks.
I will. As over his, he has a Coffee Link coffee every lunchtime. I will say to him, I've been talking to Azzouz about that. But yeah. So anyway, go back. So go back to what we were saying. So yeah, I mean, it's an interesting point that you just raised about, and it brings me on to one of my questions, which is, with all the things that you've been doing, there must have been high points and low points, over the last years. And obviously with your growth and your success, that is great, but obviously there's been some downsides as well. I'm sure the pandemic wasn't fantastic. So tell us what some of the struggles have been and what some of the high points have been for Coffee Link.
Yeah, I mean, it's a tough one to answer because there are so many things to mention and celebrate. From, as I said, being able to pay for our solar panels. Being able to print our cups and they were biodegradable. We have recyclable bags. We have biodegradable bags. I think the pandemic is probably a mixture of high and low. It's again, and I can elaborate because it really made me feel really the anxiety and the panic of what we worked for could disappear overnight, and that was probably the lowest point where we go from a decent income to literally zero overnight. When we were asked to close our stores by Public Health England, and when we did, we thought, my God, this is, what can we do? What do we do? And it was literally like that. It was like horrible feeling. And But then it was sort of highest moments a few months later when we decided to keep the roastery open for online orders only and telephone orders. And our customers kept coming back and ordering and coming back. And I thought, well, actually, we still have a purpose. We still have a reason to keep going. And with all the anxiety of it, we kept going. And I'm indebted to the team here who kept going with me, because I remember the height of the anxiety where I said to, and I'm sure you remember the anxieties too, because it was a matter of, stay safe and stay home, really.
Yes.
And I had to say to the team, you don't have to come to work. I feel your anxiety, because I feel it. And I was really candid with them. And with the exception of one person, everyone else came. And I thought, wow. And I feel indebted to them, because all of us had to go home, and all of us always thought, have I brought something home, to kids and family and so on. And so all of us have those daily. I had them, and I'm honest about them, because I can't deny them. They're part of me. They're part of the experience. So the highest probably point is to realize that you could still keep going, even though you've really been through that anxiety and horrible experience. And then you're starting to emerge slowly, even though you're still anxious about the invoices building up and coming through. And then you think, well, actually, I could still, my team is still here. We could still keep going. We're still healthy. And then you realize that, and you think, fine, we could keep going. So that was a high point. And as I said to you earlier, sometimes you feel tired, but you want to keep going. And that's what I meant. You're literally so tired, but it's like being in a jungle, and you can see the lights, you can see the exit route.
You're driven. It's a drive, isn't it?
Yeah.
I mean, how was it? Sorry, how was it for your producers though? I mean, I know for us, one of my real anxieties was for the people in India, especially in India, because they had it so bad over there. And how was it for your producers, and how did you manage to get coffee sent to you?
Yes, we I mean, unfortunately, for our producers, it's been very difficult as well. So there was almost like an instant shrinking of operation, an instant reduction of capacity to harvest, to interact. I mean, Colombia has been badly affected because there was a huge shortage of help and labor. And Brazil, not only shortage that happened, was there was also frost. When I say frost, I mean even 27. I remember reading a report a couple of months ago, 27th of July, it was supposed to be 12 degrees, and it was -1, -2.
Oh my goodness.
So that means, again, the harvest is not going to be as good this year, which means that other prices will go up elsewhere, because the demand, say, on Kenyan and Ethiopian coffee traditionally will not be as high, but this year will be higher. So the prices are going up, to the point where I'm talking to our farmers, and usually they're asking us to commit for orders early, but this time they're not asking us to commit. The coffee is there, but they know the prices are going up. And so it's a fantastic dynamic situation where things are changing. And even though I can be anxious at time, I'm thinking, maybe it's not all bad, but maybe there are so many changes that really almost reconfiguring the dynamic of trade, and we just have to live with it, and we just have to take it as it comes. And yes, sometimes we will have to pay higher prices.
And communicate it. I mean, I think that's the thing, isn't it? Going back to what we were saying before about people feeling that almost entitlement to keep prices at a certain level. It's how we communicate why. I mean, we had very similar to you. We had that whole, oh my God, everything's stopped. What do we do? How do we keep things going? And then after a few weeks, we were thinking, what can we do to help the producers and everything? And we came up with face masks, and I'm very proud to say we got them out kind of before a lot of other people, and we were very much around, it's got to be organic and rain-fed indigenous cotton. It's got to be unbleached, no plastic. But I won't do a selling thing on the face masks. That's something from last year. But that was but then people were saying, well, these are really expensive. These are really expensive. I can get a plastic one for, I don't know, a pack of 5 million for £2.50 or whatever in the local shop or whatever. And you're saying, okay, but it's communicating what that value is. And some people will always go for the cheap plastic tat, and other people will understand the value. And I'm pleased to say, similar to you, we had customers who came to us, we had new customers, we had revisiting customers, and it kind of kept us going. And because they understood there was the story there, they could scan and they could find out that they're genuinely helping people who really need to have help, and getting what I consider to be a far superior product as well. So
that's brilliant. That's really good. And so you really have first-hand experiences of all the challenges we face, really, because, and you hit it on the nail, because communication and the being able to highlight the reasoning behind it is so important. Because and as I said again, we're all bargain hunters, you know, we all want value, but it's just taking that moment to say, well, what am I trying to achieve here? Is it value to me? Is it value to someone else? And I think once you start with that thinking of inclusiveness, then you think actually it's fine. Yeah, because, and I think it will take some time before businesses like ourselves create enough credibility that people will go out of their way. I mean, some people are already doing it. People go out of their way to support us. They don't really worry about the price because they have that faith that we'll only charge what we feel is right.
Yes.
So we're not,
trust.
Yeah, so the element of trust will again take another layer of questioning, because when you have faith in that business, that the business isn't going to cheat you, the business is not going to over, you know, charge you. Then it becomes easier to really engage in those transactions without undue stress or anxiety, really. Because
and I think it makes it easier for people, because I think people are very time poor, sort of, especially in Western cultures. So if you find businesses that you trust, so for example, I'll name drop, I get our vegetable box every week from Abel and Cole, and maybe when you first go to them you think, gosh, this is a bit more expensive, and it is, but now I don't even think about it. I think, well, I know that they are doing their best. I know that they're, you know, they're doing the best that they can do, and all of that. And I don't have to think about it anymore. It's out of my head now. The decision is made, and we get our coffee from you guys, and we get stuff from various plastic-free shops and supermarkets too. I'm not saying that I'm perfect in every way, but what I mean is that once you've made the decision and asked the questions and got answers you're happy with, and you trust that brand, then you just keep going back to them.
Yes, absolutely. And again, this is a perfect example of how what we spoke about earlier in terms of justifying and redefining the value. You know, you've done that, you've exercised that authority, you've questioned, you're happy with it, and you move on. And then, because for you, you're celebrating their success by supporting them. And that's amazing. That's really, really good. And this is the kind of engagement we all need, really, when you see someone trying and you think, oh, I'm going to help them out, and that's how you help them out, because you're trading with them, you're buying from them.
Yeah, that's a really good point.
That's
a really good point.
Yeah, the alternative is literally you're helping another big corporate, and I have nothing wrong with corporates. I mean, sometimes they do amazing good work, but not all the structures are transparent enough. And so the trust element in a business, and I think that grows and grows, they become a little bit more restricted in what they can divulge, and then they have secret recipes, and you know, but we don't know. I mean, as I said, I read about good examples and bad examples for big corporations. You know, big corporations can be an amazing force for good when there is enough genuine interest to the greater good. But there's also examples where, as I mentioned to you, in the coffee world, some companies, they will go into, say, a village, a producing region, it could be any country, and then they will look for a key person, and that key person becomes their local representative, and then they will say to them, you know, here's the money, here's the cash, go and get it.
It's all about the money.
Yes, yeah. And then that person will go, obviously maybe with a little commission, they will get farmers. Farmers have no knowledge.
No.
Minimum price, they have no knowledge. I mean, you'll be amazed. I mean, again, sorry, apologies, I keep going on to coffee, but for me, it saddens me greatly that somebody would produce a lovely coffee and they have no means of drinking it.
That's terrible, isn't it? That is
It's
terrible.
terrible. And those are the examples that make me think, oh my God, this is inequitable. This is bad.
Yeah.
Because, if you're selling a produce, you should be able to enjoy it with your family.
That's really true. That's so true. And it's the same again. You apologize for talking about coffee. I can't help myself talking about cloth. But I was just thinking the same thing. How awful to, and a lot of people have to do this, make clothes that they then can never wear.
Yes.
Because they can't afford it.
It's really, really bad. I mean, I couldn't believe it when I first. I mean, Ethiopia probably is the exception because they have a strong local coffee culture. And they have an amazing culture called the coffee ceremony. And it sounds grand, but it actually happens every home, almost every day. If you go to someone's house, you have a coffee ceremony.
Lovely.
Where coffee is roasted for you. It goes from green, you can actually see it, and it goes from green to roasted to brewed. Now, personally, I think you should not brew it immediately after roasting it, but that's me again being picky. But it's a lovely thing to do. Now imagine that you go to your friend's house and then they'll brew coffee for you, and then you have like 2 hours to have a chat. But then again, as you said, in some countries, people tend to be, time rich. Some people are time poor, and so things are changing. I mean, even in places like Ethiopia, there is a growing middle class section of society, and so things are changing. So the world is becoming smaller, more dynamic, and I think we just have to really embrace the change and really make it work and make decisions from a good place, because that's the only way to ensure that it works for as many people as possible.
Exactly.
It will never work for everyone, but I'm glad anyway that you can relate to what you said about cotton, where someone makes a garment. I mean, imagine you're making a garment after garment after garment, knowing that you are not going to wear it.
No.
Or in our case, you're looking at, for me, it's quite self-defeating, because if I am a coffee farmer, unable to sample my own coffee, it's literally, I would be unable to judge whether my coffee is good enough, and I would be unable to improve it, and I would be unable to enjoy it and shout about it. So it's very important to enable farmers, and more importantly, when I say more, it's not more importantly, but it's probably just as important. We all complain about immigration, and if we carry on squeezing farmers so much that they see no hope in trading coffee, we're going to lose a large section of coffee producing farmers, because they all end up walking for days on end to reach the American border. I've seen recent reports of El Salvadorians
and Haiti.
Walking for Haiti. Yeah, that was really sad. But unfortunately, with Haiti, I don't think it's coffee related, but there are other countries that don't even get reported on.
No.
That work for days on end to get to Mexico and then to the United States. And a lot of them are coffee farmers, and they're giving up hope. It's not viable anymore.
No.
It's not viable.
But again, to jump from coffee to cotton, because I can't help it. If you go back to last century, one of the things that drove big changes in India was Mahatma Gandhi was saying those same questions about cotton, because cotton was being grown in India, and the raw product was then being brought to the UK to be woven into cloth in the Lancashire and Yorkshire mills, and then the cotton fabric was being brought back to India again. And people were told, you have to buy this, but of course they couldn't afford it. But they weren't allowed to take the cotton that they were growing themselves and weave it and spin it themselves to make cloth. That was against the law. So it had to always come from Europe, the UK mainly. And I think that was what inspired Gandhi to basically say, no, enough, we're not doing that. His rebellion was, we are now going to spin and weave our own cloth, and that.
Yeah, I mean, I read another article, and he was obviously quite unique in his disruption, so to speak. He was in a peaceful way, and I think lots of the situations we see. I mean, I really can't blame colonialism for all the social and economic ills of, say, colonized countries, but there are a lot of remnants practices, because even though the colonizing powers left. They've left structures that are not
Yeah.
really good,
Yeah.
and I think that is. I mean, I come from Morocco. We were colonized by the French. I'm actually really glad we were there in a way because they fixed quite a lot of things. But when they left in a mess,
Mm.
in a way,
Mm.
and it's a horrible truth. So I'm. It's not a nationalist thing for me, but it is more of the economic structures that were left in place. Because
Yes. Yeah.
ultimately, economy going forwards will play a key role. I think there was a time where religious figures used to rule the world, and then the time of elected officials now is still powerful. But I think in the future, businesses. I mean, you see already now. The
Mm.
likes of Facebook and Google and Amazon, they are the size of countries, not
Yes. Yeah.
country. And so going forward, business has its place to really impact change.
Yeah.
Business, and if it's better and well led, can actually make a huge change. And we need more women in
Yes. Definitely. Like here. Here.
yeah, women tend to be, I think, much more caring than men. Anyway, I mean, I don't mean to be sexist about it, but because it's the mother instinct in a way.
Yeah, it's diversity. What we need is diversity,
Exactly,
because
exactly.
of every type, everything that's available, we need to have it there and have. I mean, it's interesting you talk about businesses, and going back to what we were saying about corporates a few minutes ago. I mean, there's a couple of things. One is, personally, I believe that small businesses lead the way. Small businesses lead big businesses, so in terms of transparency, in terms of ethics, I bet you there's been some big coffee brands looking at what you do and thinking, what can we pick from that? What can we take? How can we communicate, in the way that they are doing? And I'm sure that when customers come to CoffeeLink, or where does it come from, we hope that they then go to other big companies and say, well, they're doing that, so why can't you do that? Why can't you be telling the stories? But why can't you do the because that's one thing. And then the other thing I was going to say, someone very wise said to me a few years ago, if a small business goes under, can't survive, they've still had an impact because they've changed the expectation of customers. So even if they don't survive, that does then impact on customers, what they think that they can get, and they will go and drive big companies to do the same. So I sort of hold those thoughts, that by existing as a small business and doing it right, even if you don't survive, you're having a positive impact.
Yes. Oh, absolutely, absolutely. I mean, I'm so glad that you mentioned that. And this is where it matters to try, even if you fail, try.
Yeah.
Because as you said, if you manage just to inspire one person or serve one person, you've actually fulfilled the role,
Mm.
because you've appealed to one person. So it's so important. And yes, you're absolutely right. Big companies sometimes will look at small companies. I mean, in our example, I can share with you now a first-hand experience where a bigger brand, approached us and they said, "Oh, you came to our attention, and would you like to convert all your stores to our brand, like a franchisee, and make more money?" This is
Mm.
what was told to me, and it was
Mm.
Costa Coffee, and
Yeah.
I said, well, I feel flattered. Thank you. Really, I was flattered,
Mm.
and because you do, if a big company, I mean,
Yeah, they notice you.
yeah, exactly. And I said, but our customers come to us because they don't want to go to you.
Well done.
Yeah, and it was quite I mean, this is about 3 years ago, and and then I said, well, you're the elephant, we're the ant,
Yeah.
surely are you going to, get rid of us? And we don't want that. I can still see value in what we do, and we love what we do. And I will never be an accountant or a lawyer. So that's what I do. That's my, this is my it's sort of baby, so to speak. And what would happen now? And he said to me, well, three things. He said, one, nothing happens. You go your way, we go our way, which is what happened eventually. Two, you do what we say, and these were his words, and you make more money, and you become a franchisee. And the third one, he said, we don't do it a lot, but we can buy you out if we
Mm.
want to. And I said, well, we're not for sale. And
Mm.
I don't know, again, my emotions probably spoke. Maybe if my head spoke, I would probably say, well, how much do you how much
Yeah,
can
we have to find out.
you
Yeah.
maybe but they were sold eventually, not us.
Yeah,
So
that's interesting, because it's all about buying and selling, not about the value of the business and the people who are being served by the business. I always think what my total absolute heroine is Anita Roddick, who started up the Body Shop, who obviously unfortunately is now passed away, but she, I believe, and I was talking to someone who knew her about this recently, she believed that when she sold the Body Shop to L'Oreal, and their thinking was that she thought she could then influence L'Oreal by being a part of that big business. But of course, once she was part of L'Oreal, she had no say, and I
yeah,
think
it is. I mean, all businesses go through stages of growth, and then yes, sometimes you exit the business, and there is fundamentally nothing wrong with it. And
no.
as long as you are talking to people of like-minded individuals who maybe share at least some of your values, and I think because as we said, if you carry on serving customers with the same values, then you're doing well. You've done
Yes.
well, whether you're in the business or out of the business. And I think it's fulfilling that role and it's impacting change. For me personally, that's what matters. So it really doesn't matter who owns a business as long as it serves a purpose.
Exactly. And I think, I mean, I'll put it out there now. If someone wants to come and offer me millions and millions of
Yes.
pounds, but where does it come from? And keep my values and have me involved with it and do what I say, I've got no problem with that. That
And
is fine.
I agree. I agree because sometimes, bigger companies, I mean, I was complimented, but also offended at the same time when I was approached. And I thought, well, actually, he's almost saying to me, well, we don't want you and what you do, but we want to take your market share, so to speak. But my market,
Yeah, but you wouldn't have that market share if you didn't do what you do. So no, I mean, it is a compliment because they saw you as a valuable asset to have. But I mean, we work with a number of big companies providing cloth and textiles and things for them, and there are some really amazing people in those companies that are trying to drive change from the inside, and I really admire that. So I think it's fundamentally about the people within that business, and they're pushing to get the right things done. And maybe that, I mean, you're obviously working with big companies as well, and it's changing it subtly that way. And as long as as you say, you get the right people, the people who think the same way as you do, then but we've also had challenges with big companies where maybe we're talking to one person and everything's all agreed, and then somebody else will come along and just squash it for financial reasons or because there's a change of personnel. So that is the danger with big companies. People change.
yes, oh, absolutely. And this is yeah, it's clear because again, as I said, the motives are not always as you or I will appreciate, because it's all about numbers and for them. But I still think what you do is really, really important, and I think it's so much needed these days because it provokes thoughts. It helps people change, even though when you think it isn't, it's changing people's thinking.
I think I agree with you.
Yeah.
I think, and same with your business. I'm really conscious of the time, so I'm going to ask you one more quick question because we could probably talk for hours. But obviously, next month we have COP26 up in Glasgow, thinking about the planet, the environment, all the leaders of the world, hopefully going to be coming along there. What do you think are going to be, should be the priorities for businesses and also for individuals, and what kind of things do we need to focus on now to try and meet some of the goals of the Paris Agreement?
I think the goals I think are clear, which is a reduction of CO2 emissions, and I think it's what we do to achieve those goals. It's going to be small things that each one of us does, and I think the first, in my personal view, the first thing we should focus on is more relevant content for people on television, on papers, because it's so fundamental, it's so big, it's so huge that we can't deny it anymore. Because communication, information, quality of information, evidence, more data, that will in turn, in probably no time, change people's habits, because we probably undermine, not undermine, we underrate our importance individually and what we can do. Society is nothing but a collection of you and I, or individuals. So we need to treat people with respect by giving them good honest data and leave the rest to them.
Yeah.
Really.
Yeah,
Now,
it's interesting.
as I said, you can't tell people buy from this guy, don't buy from this guy. We can't. We can't say don't shop here, shop here. The purpose is to get businesses that are not environmental to become environmental. So it's not to punish a business for being profitable. It's not to make people shy away from doing enterprise that will be environmentally friendly. So I genuinely think we cannot succeed if we don't change people's attitudes. And it starts with everyone, really, literally. So the information, the quality of information, the quality of data, giving stories that relate. I mean, I drew a lot of inspiration from my early days, you know, in a small village where if a car passes, you want to know who's driving it, where did they go, what did they buy. You know, it was very, very dormant, so to speak, but it was safe, it was beautiful, it was nice, and you didn't feel any lack, even though there was some lack. And but I look at it as a blessing now. I don't see it as there was lack. I think there was a lot of protection in that lack. And I think it's important for people to realize how people live in some African countries, how someone would live their entire life in a hut with no running water, with no electricity, and they're just fine.
Yeah,
I'm not
they've
saying
got love and they've got food.
Yeah, exactly. I'm not saying we should all live in huts, but I'm just saying it's just awareness, just to make people be more content with what they have. And yes, dream of better things and aspire for them, but do not do it while abusing someone else, because you don't see the abuse, but the abuse happens.
Yeah, no, it's interesting. And I think the pandemic as well, maybe a lot of people realized that stuff, I mean, this podcast is all about stuff and the impacts of stuff on people and planet, but maybe during the pandemic people put different values on things. So life, nature, family, hugs, you know, we realized that your latest PlayStation or your latest mobile phone, they're just tools, you know. Maybe you don't need them, you know, in the same way that you did. I mean, I think we discovered a value for things like Zooming people, which is the technology. So the technology is really, really valuable, but it's a tool to those people, to those relationships, you know. So I think that maybe changed, maybe that's the good thing. I mean, I think you're absolutely right. And again, also communicating not as a you have to make sacrifices because of the climate emergency. It's that look what we can gain by walking more. We get better health. We get more close to nature. You know, rather than we don't have to drive everywhere all the time. It's actually a benefit to us. It's not a lack. I think they need to change. I want people to change the way that they think about these things that have to happen.
Yes, oh, absolutely. And I think I totally agree, really. I think it's just changing the way we think about things and feeling free to ask why, where does it come from, really?
Yeah.
Who's benefiting? Who's it helping? Because once you start putting those once you put those elements into the equation, fundamentally people will want to do something that helps someone else.
Yeah. Community.
Yeah, so always, and because we're becoming more of a global village, and people are less likely to not care. That makes sense. So it's you know, people will want to know that their buying habit is not affecting someone else in the other parts of the world, but they need to know about it. And this is where excuse me, this is where information comes in.
Yeah, and yes, building those connections, definitely, absolutely. And I think understanding about the impacts on people and the planet, but also we've seen people wanting to buy local more, haven't we? And understanding that things that they think they're buying locally actually come from a long way away. And that's what I say. They say to me, oh, I'm going to buy that from that shop because that's a local shop. I mean, that's fantastic, but it's still a t-shirt and it's made of cotton, and that cotton was farmed in a different country. There isn't any cotton that grows in the UK, you know, and very little grows in Europe. I think Turkey is probably the only place in Europe that cotton will grow. So, you know, it's people understanding there's a chain. It's not just the shop that you go to. There's impacts all the way back, and at the end too. So when you finish with something, there's those impacts as well. We're part, as you say, we're a global village. We're part of a big system. You mentioned right at the beginning, I think, about Prince William, and I don't know if you were referring to the Earthshot TV program. Yes, I
Yes.
watched it the other day, and anyone listening, I really recommend that you watch it.
Yes.
The beginning parts were wonderful, explaining about waste and things being produced. And I think there was a fantastic section with bunches of grapes. Did you see that part where they were picking grapes from vineyard and then going through the whole process of saying what gets thrown away during that process. So some of them get thrown away at the vineyard because they pull the odd rotten one off, and then they have to say these grapes are they have to all be a uniform size and they all have to look the same. So some of them go in the bin, and then they come across in a container. So some of them don't survive the container journey, but rather than throwing away just the ones that don't survive, if there's a case of grapes and some of them look like they've gone off, the whole lot gets thrown away. So it was talking about that, and I thought it was well worth, I'd recommend anyone to watch that program.
Yes, I do too. I think it's brilliant. I mean, what I took away from it was, I mean, wastage is a huge subject, and it's really bad in some cases. The other thing that I really thought was interesting was, in so many developing countries, there are people who are working on new gadgets, on things to help the environment, or have new practices. Or there was an example of an Indian girl who saw that on the street vendors used to burn a lot of coal, and that's highly obviously polluting. And so she came up with a cart with a solar panel roof with a battery storage.
Wonderful.
And I thought, wow, that's brilliant. And not only is it environmentally friendly, but it also allows them to move about, to go to places where they can sell more or whatever. So we take it for granted, but Earth is solar powered, really.
Yes.
Nothing would happen without the sun, really, and we'll all perish. But we're not really tapping into that power properly.
No, it's true.
Yeah,
it's true.
and I think it's just maybe a greater awareness, and so it can be done. I'm positive about making the right changes, but we just need to be more aware. I think awareness is so key, because it will just fundamentally change anything and everything we do.
Exactly. We don't. That's a really good point. Nothing has to stay the same. You know, if we don't like it, we can change it. We've got the power to change it.
Change will happen anyway.
Yes.
Just that we can sort of manipulate.
We can make it the way we want
change.
it to be.
Yeah,
Or
exactly.
so certainly, if you don't, as you said before, you try. You know,
Yes.
I mean, one thing I will say about every social entrepreneur I know, any entrepreneur I know actually, we're positive. You know, we believe that we have a change that can be made, or we'll certainly give it a good go anyway, you know, in any field. And I think it's trying to bring that positivity, that drive and that energy to other people, to say, yeah, you're a part of this, you're not powerless, you know, just by what you choose to buy or who you choose to talk to or the TV shows you watch, then you're making a difference, you know, everything.
I agree, and I think you're absolutely right. We get conditioned so much that we probably, I don't, but we tend to probably devalue the power of non-profit organizations. But they are very similar to profit-making organizations, because it's only because we conditioned to value money so much.
Yes, that's so true.
But we, as I said to you, all of us serve a purpose, and it's just that some of the purpose tend to be with the monetary value. The other person, the purpose from a non-profit or a social organization has a huge amount of value, but it's just because it doesn't have the monetary value attached to it, people tend to dismiss it. But it does make change.
It really does, and in the end, we can't eat money, and we won't be able to take it with us when we go. So it's I see money as a tool as well. It's something we can use, and unfortunately, we do need it in our current economy, but we only use it to get the things that we really need or really want, and it's making good decisions about what you use it for. Anyway, I'm going to have to end it here because we've been talking and it's been absolutely amazing. I'll put the link to the Earthshot Pro iPlayer link in the comments that go with the podcast, and I'll put a link obviously to Coffee Link so people can find out more about what you and Rebecca and the team do with Coffee Link. So the last thing I want to say is thank you so much, Azzouz, for joining me on the Where Does It Come From podcast today.
Well, I want to also thank you for inviting me. It's been an absolute pleasure, as always, to talk to you, and thank you, and have a lovely day.
Thank you, and you.